What's the worst thing someone has ever done to you? Was it when your friend betrayed you, told everyone your deepest secrets, or made fun of you behind your back? If so, you know how painful it is when someone you trusted turns out to be a liar or a traitor. While modern society has developed more civilized ways to deal with such problems, our ancestors used punishments that were much harsher and sometimes even deadly. In today's video, we'll look at some of the darkest punishments for treachery throughout history, so stay tuned until the end to find out just how far people have gone to punish liars. We'll also discuss some interesting facts about the psychology of lying and the impact of betrayal. Before we start, please subscribe to our channel by clicking the button above, and don't forget to leave a comment below. Punishment No. 1. The death penalty. The death penalty was, and still is, one of the most severe punishments that can be imposed on an individual. It was used in many cultures throughout history as a punishment for a variety of crimes, including murder, treason, and in some cases lying. In ancient Rome, lying under oath in court was considered a very serious offense. A person found guilty of this crime could be sentenced to death by the magistrate. During the Middle Ages in Europe, lying about certain matters such as heresy or witchcraft could also result in capital punishment. For example, during the Salem witch trials in the early 1600s, over 200 people were put to death after being accused of lying about seeing witches or practicing witchcraft. In some cases, people were even killed for lying about not knowing something. For example, during the Spanish Inquisition, a person could be punished for lying about their knowledge of heretical teachings or activities. Lying was seen as a way of concealing sin and deception and was taken very seriously. Interestingly, lying under oath was also a crime in ancient Greece and was punishable by a fine, imprisonment, or exile. However, the punishment was usually reserved for those who lied for personal gain or to harm another person. In ancient China, lying to the emperor was considered a very serious offense and could result in the death penalty. The emperor was seen as the father of the nation, and any lie told to him was seen as a form of disrespect and disloyalty. Despite the severity of the punishment, lying was still common in Chinese society, and people often had to resort to using euphemisms and code words when speaking to the emperor to avoid being put to death. Overall, the death penalty was a very harsh punishment for lying, but it was also one of the most effective deterrents. The fear of being killed was enough to make people think twice before they lied. However, this type of punishment was not always fair, or just as innocent people were often killed for lying about things they did not know. Moving on, let's talk about one of the strangest punishments for liars: being sewn up alive. Imagine being sewn up inside a wooden box with only a small hole for air. That was the fate of one unlucky liar named George Custis. He was an Englishman who lived in the 18th century and was known for his tall tales and unbelievable stories. One day he went too far when he claimed that he had seen the devil himself. People didn't believe him, so he decided to make a bet. He said that if people doubted his story, he would allow them to sew him up in a wooden box as a test. Of course, people took him up on his offer and sewed him up, but instead of letting him tell the story, they left him to die of starvation and suffocation. When they finally opened the box, they found him dead. This strange punishment was not unheard of in the past. There were other cases of people being sewn up alive as a form of punishment for lying or other crimes. In one case in the Ottoman Empire, a man was sewn up inside a drum for stealing. Another case involved a woman who was sewn up in a coffin for committing adultery. These punishments were usually carried out by religious authorities as a way of enforcing moral standards and punishing those who broke them. However, the case of George Custis was particularly gruesome and has become one of the most famous examples of a liar being sewn up alive. Next, we have a punishment that was both humiliating and painful: being tied up and whipped. This type of punishment was common throughout history and was used for a variety of offenses, including lying. In ancient Rome, for example, people who committed fraud or perjury were tied up and publicly flogged. During the Middle Ages in Europe, criminals were often tied up and whipped as a form of punishment. And in the Ottoman Empire, a person who lied in court could be tied up and flogged in front of the judge and the public. One particularly gruesome example of this type of punishment occurred during the French Revolution. During this time period, there was a lot of political turmoil and people were often accused of disloyalty or lying to the government. In one case, a man named Charles de Brossa was tied up and whipped in the public square for lying about his loyalty to the revolution. He was accused of saying that he had heard a rumor that the king was planning to escape the country, and although he denied saying it, he was found guilty and brutally flogged. This punishment was intended to be a warning to others who might be tempted to lie or spread rumors that could harm the revolution. Ultimately, this type of punishment was a way to humiliate and control the population and prevent them from engaging in any form of dissent or spreading false information. Let's move on to a more psychological form of punishment, being forced to listen to lies. While it may not seem like a punishment in the traditional sense, being forced to listen to lies can be a powerful form of retribution. This type of punishment was often used in ancient cultures to humiliate and shame the liar. For example, in ancient Greece, a liar could be forced to wear a special badge around their neck that identified them as a liar. Similarly, in ancient Rome, a person who lied in court could be publicly identified with a scarlet letter. During the Middle Ages in Europe, a liar could be put on trial by jury, and if found guilty, they would be publicly declared a liar and banned from the community. Being declared a liar was seen as the ultimate disgrace and could result in social ostracism and the loss of one's reputation. This type of punishment was also used in some cultures to punish those who spread rumors or gossip. In some cases, a person who spread rumors could be forced to walk through the town square while people shouted and yelled insults and accusations at them. This type of punishment was designed to shame the person and prevent them from repeating their behavior. Being forced to listen to lies can also be a form of torture. In some cases, a person could be subjected to prolonged periods of hearing lies in order to extract information or confession. During the Cold War, for example, some prisoners were subjected to a form of torture that involved being forced to listen to recordings of lies and propaganda. This was done to break down the prisoner's mental state and make them more susceptible to interrogation. Now let's move on to one of the most fitting punishments for a liar, being buried alive. Imagine being buried alive, trapped in the dark and suffocating as the dirt piles on top of you. This was the fate of one unfortunate liar named Rodrigo de Triana. He was a Spanish man who lived in the 15th century and was known for his boastful nature. One day he claimed that he had seen a mythical creature called a guanin, which resembled a bird with a human head. Many people believed his story and became convinced that such a creature existed. However, later he admitted that he had made the whole thing up. As punishment, he was sentenced to be buried alive. On the day of his execution, he was taken to the town square and a hole was dug for him. He was then placed in the hole with some food and water, and the hole was filled with earth to make sure that he wouldn't survive. They also placed stones on top of the grave to make it more difficult for anyone to dig him out. Unfortunately, Rodrigo survived for several days, sending desperate messages to his family and friends begging for help. However, no one came to rescue him, and he eventually died of starvation and dehydration. This punishment was not uncommon in the past, and there were other cases of people being buried alive for lying. In one case in ancient Rome, a man was buried alive for lying about his wife's dowry. In another case during the Spanish Inquisition, a woman was buried alive for lying about her involvement in witchcraft. These punishments were usually reserved for the most extreme cases of lying and were meant to serve as a warning to others. We've covered some of the darkest punishments for treachery throughout history, from the death penalty to being buried alive. What do you think is the worst thing someone has ever done to you? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.